Hi everyone. Today I wanted to present to you another tool that I developed and that utilized the web browser control to empower access and give us certain capabilities that we didn't have natively. And basically I entitled it Improved HTML, but in reality it should have been Bringing HTML to Access. Access has RTF in it, which is a weak stripped down version of HTML. And sadly, it just wasn't sufficient for some of my needs with certain clients. When I'm thinking of they were creating, or we wanted to be able to create email content, so HTML body for an Outlook email and things like that. And you couldn't do simple things, like you couldn't justify the text, you couldn't build a table, you couldn't superscript or strike through. There's a whole slew of very basic HTML that you just can't do in RTF. Let alone the more advanced stuff. And that's when I set out and I developed this tool, and I'd like to present it to you today in the hopes that it can be helpful to a few of you out there. So let's dig in. So as always, this discussion starts with a web article. As you can see, back in 2019, I made this happen, something I had already done for clients before that, but I decided to make it public information because I thought it could help others. Now you can go through the article. I cover a whole list of different HTML elements that the RTF simply doesn't support, so you can't do, but just basic things like you can't justify text, you can't insert tables, you can't do subscript, superscript, strike through, like just basic things, like just headings. You can't even do an H1, H2, H3. Like this is the most basic of all basic things when you come to HTML formatting. So this is why I set out to try to find a solution. And the solution was to use, once again, web tools. Why reinvent the wheel? Why try to create my own form with all sorts of buttons and all sorts of coding? And why? There's already out there a whole slew of what you see is what you get editors, HTML editors. So it was just a question of incorporating one of them, and I chose the tinymce, incorporating it into the web browser control, and instantaneously I was able to give functionality, complete functionality, because this is what we see. You see this in WordPress, you see this all over the place. So this control should be very familiar to most users on top of it. That's the added bonus from not trying to recreate the wheel here. So you can read the content of the article if you want. And at the bottom, you have a download. Now, originally, when I set out and I did this, I was developing in 32-bit. But as you can see here, I have a section here that explains exactly what you have to do to make this 64-bit, or actually I use conditional compilation. So if you implement this, it'll run on both 32 and 64-bit. If we download the file, and then we go into the folder, and we minimize this guy, so we can bring it on to our desktop. Now remember, now with the new macro security, we have to first unblock the zip file. It's very important, or all the files within will be automatically blocked. So unblock the zip file, then you can extract all. And once it's extracted, now we're ready to roll. Now the database is split into two, I guess, sections, shall we say it. You have the database, the ACCDB, and then you have a folder with the HTML. And the HTML houses the index page that it loads and reads by default. And it also has here the folder for the tinymce, so everything that's required to make that happen. And as you'll see here, it has the JS, the plugin JS, the themes, the skins, all these other things. Now I've kept mine very simple, but the data is there if you want to add skins and themes and things like that. It isn't that hard to do. You can modify the HTML to suit your needs. Now, if we come back to the database itself, we're using a web browser control, and we're using advanced functionality here in JavaScript. So it's important to use the feature browser emulation. Now, if you're not familiar with feature browser emulation, what it is, it's a registry key that you add and modify, and it tells the web browser control, no, don't pretend or don't use it as IE7, which is ancient and archaic. Please instead use IE11 or IE10 or whatever you can choose by changing that setting. that it will emulate a different version than the default version 7, which is just archaic. So what I'm telling you is you should automatically, on any machine you work on in reality, you should be emulating IE 11. And that will avoid a lot of these JavaScript errors and things not rendering properly. Now to do that, you simply do the reg editor. I should also show you, I do have an article on the subject. I'll include the link, don't worry. And if you go down to the feature browser emulation, here is the registry key you're looking for. And then these are the different settings you can apply. We're going to be setting here for IE 11. We're going to set it to 1101, or 11 would work as well. So if I come in here, you have to, in feature browser emulation, you have to create. So you come in here and create, as you can see, a D word, 32-bit value. And you have to entitle it msaccess.exe, which is the executable for access. And then you just, once you get it, you'll define a decimal value for that 11,000 or that 11,001, whatever the case may be. And now, when you launch Access, it will emulate Internet Explorer 11 instead of the default 7. And this will make many things run smoothly that would not have properly rendered previously. Once that's done, and we can actually close the registry editor, it will open up. Now you'll need a trusted location, or you'll have to enable the content most probably, but it will run. And as you can see, you get a properly set up HTML interface. Right now you're getting an issue here because I am missing an image. It's normal. I'm on a different machine. But as you can see here, we have all of the standard buttons plus more, because you've got all sorts of things in submenus and drop downs. Okay, links and special characters, horizontal lines, formatting. As you can see, you get the idea. You have complete and utter control here. So how does this work exactly? Well, in a shell, and we'll look at the code in 2 seconds to look at it a little bit more in detail, but basically what you do here, the minute you exit the control and you go somewhere else, gets taken from the tinymce web control and gets put in a hidden control on this form. There's a control here, which is bound to a table. So basically, whatever you do here, the HTML is extracted and put into a table. And once it's in a table, as you're well aware, you can then do whatever you want with it. It's great for emails. That's what I actually originally designed this all for, was for an emailing system for my daughter's daycare at the time. So they're able to do all of their development in Access, because that's where they have their contact database and things like that. And they're able to build up their emails themselves without needing to know HTML. And then I have a form that allows them to send emails using these as templates and things like that. You can use it to create HTML files. You can, the sky's the limit here. You can just keep it rendered in a web browser control when you're done without needing to have the whole menu if you wanted to do that. But yeah, it's a very versatile little tool here. So what exactly is under the hood of this beast? It's not very complex in reality. So let's just take a very quick glance at it. As you can see, I have 3 modules, and then I have the form. Oh, excuse me, I have the form here. For the bulk of it, this font module is in the editor. You're able to select fonts when you're creating your text if you want. So what this is used is it gets a list of local fonts on your machine, and then I push it to the tinymce, and it is available to you to choose the fonts. The array is used to just sort them alphabetically instead of having just a mismatch. I have some file and folder helper functions, but everything is basically in the form itself. And it really isn't that complicated. Basically, it works in both directions, right? It does a push and it does a pull. So initially here in the current, so when you go onto the record initially, it's going to do a pass. So it's going to take the content from the form, the HTML content, and it's going to pass it to the browser, the web browser control. And that's what it does here. It's going to run This function executes script, so it's going to run that command and it's going to push it to the web browser, and the content that we have in our table gets displayed when we go on a new record. And then similarly, when you lose focus on the web browser, so when you leave the web browser control, it's going to then do a retrieve data. It's going to grab what's in the web browser control at that point in time. We're going to get it back and we're going to push it to our controls, and it's saved back in the table. And then there's a little helper function here that we need to be able to convert a couple special characters and whatnot between HTML and what Access accepts. But that's really what it is at the end of the day. It's just a push and a pull. So we have two JavaScript commands that I use that are on the web page to push and to pull. And that really is all there is to it. It is not rocket science. I'm not saying it was easy the first time I tried to create, but if you go over now that it's functional and review the code a little bit, you'll see it really isn't that complex a thing to do. And it's all just because of that tinymce. It already existed. So instead of, there's thousands of lines of code in the tinymce, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have to do any of that. So you can see here, look, 356 kilobytes. It's a huge JavaScript file to give us all the functionality that HTML has to offer. And it goes on for miles, okay? But as you can see here, 364,000 columns of text. So it is huge, but I didn't have to do any of that work. I just took someone else's open source work and incorporated it into Access, and I gained all that functionality in one shot. And that's the beauty of the web browser control, as I've shown now with pivot tables, as I've shown with the improved SQL editor, now with this, with bringing proper HTML into Access the way it should have been from the get-go. It isn't hard to do. We're lucky enough that we are able to employ the web browser control in that manner to bring us these features and give users everything they want and need to be able to do their jobs. Like I say, this is unparalleled when it comes to creating email content. Okay? So that really is, to sum it up, how this works. It's as simple as that. You just have to remember the registry hacks, and it emulates in Internet Explorer 11. And beyond that, you're off to the races, and you can incorporate this into any database. As you can see, very easily. It's not hard to do. A couple modules in one form. And you can put this into application in production very easily. I hope this is something new. I hope it's something useful. As always, thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with me. I've been greatly appreciated. Like, subscribe. If you can share and promote in any way, it's greatly appreciated. Drop me a line below. I'd love to know if this is something that can be useful to you. Give me ideas as to how it's being used. I'd also love to know where some people are located, which countries, what type of reach I'm getting with my videos. So feel free to drop me a line if you don't mind. And we'll see you in the next video, guys. Have a great day.